The league being wrapped up midway through the year. One of the worst relegation fights ever.
Well, as we know, a really beleaguered Southampton side.
A lack of rivalries. For many, the most competitive league in the world is starting to feel a little boring.
Football's become a little bit predictable, a little bit boring at times.
While it's still the most watched league, some are feeling it has lost its spark. Now, I initially saw this narrative being pushed mainly by Arsenal fans, and who can blame them? I'd call the league boring too if I saw my team finish second place 3 years in a row. Congrats to Arsenal on the treble. But the argument that the Premier League has become a bit of a snooze fest has been going on longer than just the 2025 season. Because before this, well, one team had won 6 titles in 7 years. When Pep Guardiola arrived at Manchester City in 2016, something changed. Not just at the club, but across the entire Premier League. City didn't just get better, they became a machine. A winning machine. In 2017-2018, they hit 100 points, something no one had ever done in the Premier League. They weren't just beating teams, they were destroying them. Then the season after, 98 points. But the dominance didn't stop there. 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. All Manchester City, 4 titles in a row. The only one they didn't win was the COVID season. And then even then, they came flying back the next year. But here's the thing. When one team is winning it all the time, it takes something away. Now, it feels like we already know how the story is going to end. Because more often than not, City had already wrapped up the league before the final match day. In the 2025 season, it's the same thing. It's just instead of City, it was Liverpool that wrapped up the league early. And that's tough for fans of other clubs. United, Chelsea, Spurs, they're not chasing a title. They're just trying to finish top 4. Well, for Spurs and United, they're just trying to be high enough so that when you Google Premier League table, you can actually see them. And the way City wins makes it feel even more robotic. You guys remember this Nike commercial where Ronaldo, Neymar, Zlatan, Rooney all had to fight robots? In many ways, Pep City has become those robots. They're not wild, they're unpredictable, they're clean, sharp, clinical. I mean, Haaland himself looks like a robot.
Times are changing.
Football has changed. I'm not sure it's a good thing.
We'll see Ronaldo. The question now, is this the end of phenomenal football?
They don't mess around. They control games, wear teams down. It's smart football, but it's not always fun football. I feel like there's less chaos, less madness, less moments of magic. You watch them play and you can't help but admire the quality, but you're not feeling anything. A part of that comes down to the squad itself. They're almost ran too well. £100 million player on the bench? No problem. KDB is injured? Foden can step up. Mahrez leaves? No one even talks about it. It's not just about the money though, because we've seen a ton of teams spend even more than Manchester City and come nowhere near replicating Pep Guardiola's success. It's not money, it's the Baldi's system. Every player fits in, every piece works. Like I said before, it's like watching a football robot. Very, very efficient. And the thing is, other teams have now tried to replicate Pep's success. Look at how conservative Chelsea and Arsenal play. Both teams led by a Pep successor. I actually read a stat the other day that the number of shots from outside the box in the Premier League has been declining steadily, with the average number of shots from outside the box per game falling from 13.3 in 2004 to 9.1 in the 2024 season. A 32% decrease. I mean, you can see it in the matches. There are less Mavericks than ever before. Even at the youth level, players are punished for taking risks, for playing outside the system. Now, I'll be honest with you guys. I personally enjoy watching Manchester City play. In years before, Kevin De Bruyne was one of my favorite players. 2024, Foden was a beast. Doku embarrassing defenders is cool. Haaland bodying someone is special. But I can understand why others don't want to watch City pass the ball left and right for 90 minutes, trying to break down the bus, and then eventually at the end of the 90 minutes, still win. People love to call League and the Bundesliga farmers leagues, yet City has been farming England for the better part of a decade. Now, of course, people will argue that some of City's title races actually came down to the last match day. And while that's true, the winner still ended up being City. The other thing is that in those tight title races, there was only one team actually competing with City. Majority of the time, it was Klopp's Liverpool. Then in recent years, it was Arteta's Arsenal. Although let's be honest, nobody at any point actually thought Arsenal would win the league. Part of that is due to how dominant City have been, and the other part is down to the fact that Arsenal are just serial bottlers. and crumble anytime there's any pressure. That predictability really does kill the joy of the league. Now, to be honest with you, one team dominating England isn't something new. Historically, one team has always dominated. Before Pep City, it was Ferguson's United, so the whole one team farming everyone else has been going on for ages. But what I will say though about Fergie's title winning seasons is that at least there was more than one team that was actually competing with them. First of all, Fergie's teams weren't regularly breaking 90 plus points. Secondly, let's look at the 2008 season where United were at their peak. This was Ronaldo's Ballon d'Or season, they won the Champions League. Well, in the Prem, they got 87 points, beating out Chelsea by 2 points and Arsenal by 4. Now compare that to the 2023 season of City, arguably their peak. They won the treble and look at the league. Arsenal 5 points behind, and then the next team is United 14 points behind. Now guys, I'm not saying that there weren't seasons where Fergie ran away with the title. I'm saying this before the Manchester United fans come for my throat. His last league title was won by a landslide, 11 points over City. It just felt like at the time there was more unpredictability. While Ferguson dominated, I felt like his opponents were actually exciting. Whether it was Wenger's Arsenal, Mourinho's Chelsea, or even some of those early City teams managed by Mancini, there was more unpredictability, or at least competition all around. Now the lack of competition is also due to the fact that the traditional Big Six is really falling apart. For years, when people talked about the Premier League, they always mentioned the Big Six: Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester City, Manchester United, Tottenham Hotspur. These were the clubs with all the money, the big name players, and the global fan base. They didn't just play in the league, they ran it. From around 2014 to 2019, these 6 teams usually took the top 6 spots in the table. Every season felt like a private battle between them, while the rest of the league just tried to catch up. That was the norm. But things have changed. Since the 2018-2019 season, all 6 of those teams have only finished in the top 6 once. That grip they had on the league, it's slipping. Just look at previous seasons. Newcastle broke into the top 4. Brighton finished above some of the bigger clubs. Aston Villa got Champions League football. And now Forest is following the same path. So what's going on? Well, what's happened in the Premier League is the floor has risen significantly. Clubs that were normally either in the middle of the pack or towards the bottom have shot up due to recruiting smartly and having an actual project. You know, the opposite of whatever the hell United is doing. Because outside of Leicester's wonderful run in 2016, the smaller clubs have rarely made noise. A big part of that was that they couldn't financially compete with the big boys. I feel the same way when the girl I'm talking to shows me her inbox and it's filled with a bunch of blue check marks. I mean, United is able to burn hundreds of millions of dollars and then do it again. There's basically no repercussions for their bad decisions because they generate so much revenue. So in order to compete, the smaller clubs had to be better with their decision making and recruiting. In the same way that I started dating poorer girls, so that I looked rich in comparison. For example, Brighton uses a lot of data to recruit their players. It's how they take a player like Caicedo, who not many people knew, and transform him into a 100 mil plus player. Then they go back to their database and find his replacement, Baliba, who is another player that is most likely going to go for a big sum of money. Real Madrid, they have a little bit of a different strategy. These clubs actually have a recruitment strategy and a long-term vision for their project. For example, Brentford have a direct physical style of play, so they recruit guys that fit into that mold. Same thing with Bournemouth. So when you combine good recruiting with good managers, you get teams that were previously in the middle of the pack, but are now punching well above their weight. I remember the commentators pretending like it was some huge upset that Forest beat United, but when you look at the two teams, Forest were better in every aspect. They were higher in the table, they had a better manager, better players, an actual playing identity. I know Amorim was a beast at Sporting, but in the Premier League, Nuno has been far better. He took over a Forest team that was looking at relegation and brought him to top 4. The guy is a miracle worker, and his beard is also majestic. He looks like the type of guy who would wait for me at the top of a mountain and then give me wisdom. It also becomes a lot easier for these teams to rise when the big boys ahead of them are crashing down like meme coins. Manchester United has been through manager after manager. Each one brings a new plan, a new style, but the results stay the same, up and down. Chelsea has spent a ton of money on players, but they're still developing as a team. They started the season well, and it made me think maybe their Major League Baseball strategy was actually going to work out. But now it seems like the more time Maresca has had with the squad, the worse they have gone. This, by the way, is Chelsea's passing patterns. No wonder the fans are upset. These passes lack direction and purpose, just like the life of an OnlyFans girl. Tottenham keeps switching their managers and rebuilding their squads too. Some seasons they look solid, other seasons they look completely off. There is zero consistency when it comes to Spurs. I was a big believer in Ange Postecoglou and thought after his first good season, Spurs might be back, but they aren't even in the top half of the table, chilling next to United. The battle of mid. We can't even really call them mid because they're not in the middle of the table, they're at the bottom half. And while the Giants stumble, the underdogs, they're rising. As I said before, Brian uses smart scouting and they have a clear playing style and have become one of the most exciting teams in the league. Forest went from being almost relegated to getting Champions League football. Bournemouth also used to be a relegation candidate. Now they're organized, ambitious, and quickly climbing the table. So naturally, you would think that this means that the Premier League is more competitive than ever. After all, the gap between the top teams and the bottom teams has gone even smaller. It's not just about who spends the most money anymore, it's about having a plan and sticking to it. Because the biggest argument that people used all the time for why the Premier League is the best league in the world is that on any given weekend, one team can beat another. That was the whole motto of the league, that Everton can draw Liverpool even though the two teams are in polar opposite positions in the table. But looking at social media and speaking with other people, it seems to me that only a minority of fans are actually enjoying the parity in the league. Because I think if you're a huge football lover, what's happening in the Premier League right now is enjoyable. Every team basically has at least one top player to look forward to watching on the weekend. You look at a team like Wolves, they're close to relegation, but I will watch their games because I really enjoy Cunha and the way they play as a whole. In fact, many of the teams at the bottom of the table still play really good football, maybe to a fault. I remember people criticizing Company for not adjusting to a more pragmatic system to keep Burnley up. Ipswich, for example, are going to be relegated, but Delap is a beast of a striker. Bournemouth might not have a superstar, but they have a lot of great players like Semenyo, Howson, Cliver, and Iraola plays a more chaotic system. So unlike Pep City that want to have control all the time, Bournemouth have made it their mission to create havoc and to be as direct as possible, both with and without the ball. Brighton have Matoma, Brentford have Wissa and Mbumo, Forest have Gibbs-White, West Ham have Kudos, Newcastle have Isak, and the list goes on and on. United have Garnacho. Just kidding. This guy has Ronaldo's ego, but the talent of a championship level player. What I'm trying to say is that if you really love football, every Premier League fixture has something to look forward to. But I think the reality is that the majority of people just don't care about the smaller teams. I see this all the time on social media. People will claim, oh, we want this type of content, but the data suggests otherwise. Let me give you an example. People always complain about Messi versus Ronaldo posts or any sort of debate type post because they're saying, oh, you're just trying to bait comments and create engagement in that way. Well, guess what? There's a reason those posts about drama, about debates, about discussions do better than a post that's analyzing Crystal Palace's success. People want the drama, people want the discussions. They care about rivalries and storylines and big names and drama. And the Premier League doesn't really have that right now. Like, the gap between the 4th place and the 11th place is tiny, but your average fan isn't gonna care about that. They care about what the big teams are doing, what the big players are doing, about the title race. Maybe at a push, the race for top 4. I might get excited about a game between Newcastle and Brighton to determine who's gonna get a European spot, but Dave from Exeter might not care about that fixture. So what's happened is that the floor of the Premier League has risen, but the ceiling, well, it's come down a bit, especially in the 2025 season because even City have struggled. Now, usually people would celebrate. The team who was bending everyone over and spanking them finally had an off year. But here's the problem. There was only a handful of teams that were better than the worst version of Manchester City. So these guys keep losing every game, but every week you look at the table and City are still ahead of most teams. And the other problem nowadays is there's not actually that many rivalries. Klopp vs Pep was good from a footballing perspective, though City vs Liverpool clashes were some of the highest quality football I have ever seen. But because Klopp and Pep were so lovey-dovey with each other, I feel like it was missing an edge. Because the best rivalries are the ones where there's some pride on the line. Arsenal vs Manchester United, North London Derby, Lily Phillips vs Bonnie Blue. Take the Arsenal vs Manchester United in the late 90s and early 2000s. This wasn't just two big teams playing for the title, it was war. Wenger vs Ferguson, two managers who couldn't stand each other. Tunnel bust-ups, flying pizzas, red cards flying around. It was chaos, but the kind that fans live for. Chelsea vs Spurs had that fire too. Two London clubs who simply didn't like each other. Remember the Battle of the Bridge in 2016? Spurs completely lost it, and Chelsea loved every second of it. It was wild, it was emotional, and it helped Leicester's fairy tale title run. We got a bit of it with the Arsenal vs City game and of course the late equalizer in the Merseyside derby, but that was it. 2 moments. The Arsenal one was nice in terms of the Gunners finally getting some revenge on a team that had beaten them to the league in multiple years. but imagine how sweet that victory would have been if they had done it in 2024 when both of them were in the title race. What do you guys think? Is the Premier League becoming boring? Are you guys finding yourself separating from the product? Because I still think there's a lot of great things to watch on any given weekend. Slot's Liverpool are super entertaining and direct. They've won the league playing a very different brand of football than Pep. Palmer is a beast. That's why I went to buygamejerseys.com and bought his jersey using code PETTALKS. One of my personal favorite stories has been seeing the rise of Alexander Isak. To see how the Swede has become the Premier League's newest superstar, you gotta check out this video right here.